Hello and welcome to BarbWire Strategy. My name is Colonel Jim Ed Love, and you are watching a third part of a 5-part series that I'm doing on my wood shop. In this show, we're going to be talking about my ceiling, why I picked out the ceiling that I picked out to install, and some pointers and some challenges that I went through, and hopefully there'll be pointers for you in trying to figure out exactly how you might like to put this ceiling into your garage or warehouse or outdoor storage or whatever it is. Maybe your house. Maybe you want to put the steel ceiling into your house. I chose a steel ceiling from Mueller Incorporated. And I'm going to show you some of the colors and styles that you have to pick from. Now, this ceiling that I put in actually is not meant necessarily to be a ceiling, although it can be used as a ceiling. It's not too heavy. This is actually roofing material. So what you see in my shop, and I'll show you here in a second, is actually roofing material. Hello, my name is Jim Ed Love, and welcome to BarbWire Strategy. This show is the third show in a series that I've been doing. Actually, it's the fourth film, I guess, because I had to break number 2 into 2 parts. But this is the third episode in this series that I plan to do on, and this one specifically is on my ceiling and what type of ceiling I put in and where I got it from and the challenges that I face, which will hopefully stand as pointers for you if you decide also to put the ceiling in your shop or garage or wherever it is you want to put it. I chose this ceiling from a company by the name of Mueller Incorporated. I did a lot of research to find a company. Fortunately, this company's warehouse outlet was only about 20 miles from me to the west, and I didn't have any problem with this company at all. I did special order the color, and it took about 3 weeks to get it in, but aside from that, that was the only issue, which wasn't an issue at all because I knew ahead of time that it was going to take that long to get the product in. Now, going back to the sheetrock that I had and the reason that I put the metal ceiling in, or I chose a metal ceiling to put in, part of that reasoning was based on the fact that I did not want to deal with sheetrock, and part of it was based on the fact that I did not want to, again, have to come back later on and replace the ceiling or have it to collapse, especially on my equipment in my wood shop. So if the pipes burst in there again for whatever reason, I hope they don't, but if they do, then rest assured I may have to replace the insulation. I may have to mop up some mess, but the ceiling is not going to collapse on my wood shop again, like the nasty drywall does whenever it gets wet. I really don't like dealing with drywall at all under any circumstances. I wanted to talk about Mueller, and I wanted to show you some of the brochures that they gave me and explain. Actually, this is not ceiling material. Technically, this is all roofing material. In fact, all of the pictures that you see in their catalog are of roofs and of barns and houses that this material has gone on. It is a fantastic product, and if it wasn't quite so expensive, I'd probably roof my house in it. Also, I wanted to explain here the total cost on this invoice of buying the materials for my ceiling was $528.53. I thought I would let you know exactly what the cost of this was in case you were thinking about, and I have a normal 22 by 23 foot garage. I bought 7 sheets of steel that were 12 feet long, and I bought an additional 7 sheets that were 10 feet long. Now, they actually gave me, or possibly billed me, for an extra sheet that was 12 feet long. I ended up not having to use that. I'll explain that later on. But it was a very fair company to work with. I strongly encourage you to work with this company or any company that sells this kind of material. And the fact that it's roofing material really only strengthens my reasoning for using it on my ceiling. It's going to be a strong material. It wasn't too heavy. I checked that in the very beginning. They said a lot of people use this for their ceilings in their barns or in their wood shops or even some homes, in some dens. And there's a lot of different patterns you can pick from as far as how far the ribs are from each other, or whether they have ribs or not, or whether they're corrugated. And I'll show you some of the designs in here later on. But right now, let's go out into the wood shop. Let's look at the different challenges that I had in putting the ceiling in. I decided to do this one out in my wood shop, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what went into choosing the ceiling. Now, when the original ceiling was up, of course, it was sheetrock, and the water came out of the pipe, it flooded the sheetrock, and the weight of it brought most of it down. Now, there was no insulation above the sheetrock at that time, and what I did is I decided right off from the very beginning that I wanted to insulate the garage, because for about 17 years I'd been working out here in the wintertime, and it gets cold. When I was picking out the ceiling, when it all came down, I immediately decided I wanted a ceiling that if I did have another flood, I wouldn't be subject to the ceiling coming down on me. And as I said before, if the pipe burst again, yes, it'd be a mess. I'd probably have to replace the insulation that gets wet, but I would not have to replace the steel ceiling, which was my point. Now, the thing is, when I was picking it out, I didn't know anything about what kind of steel ceiling I needed or what to pick. And the way I came around to finding it is I searched around on the internet. I looked at YouTube a lot to see about steel ceilings being put in. And to my disappointment, what I found is a lot of big warehouses using corrugated metal for ceilings. I found a few of those, and those were helpful. But I didn't find anybody who was putting in a steel ceiling in their garage. And that's what I was looking for. So I thought, you know what? When I get this whole thing done, I'm going to do a show, even though BarbWire Strategy is mostly about politics, I'm going to do a show about this steel ceiling and how I put it in, and I want to get as detailed as I was on the actual construction of it. So that's what I've been doing in these films. So coming up, I'm going to go through and explain to you everything that I did, all of the challenges that I had about cutting it in certain areas, certain ways, making allowances for the electricity or the garage fasteners. All of the things that I had to go through this video and some of next video, because I'll be talking about the patching and painting that I had to do where the ceiling came in to the drywall on the side of the garage, and how important it is. And remember, it's very important to line this thing up straight. I'm going to talk to you a lot about that and lecture you about measuring. I wanted you to know that I picked this out. I finally found a company, and fortunately this company was only west of here about 20 miles. And they had a massive selection of different types to choose from. Now on colors, they had basically 3 different colors I could have picked out. There was a light gray, there was a white, and then there was a galvanized that I could have chosen. And all of those were in the warehouse, and I could have bought them probably on the same day that I paid for them. But that's not the color we wanted. And we looked, and I'll show you the color chart I used that they gave me. I went out there and I investigated it. They gave me a color chart. I went back and I spent, about a week or 2 picking out the right color. Because, I mean, after all, I'm going to have to live with it for who knows how long. And Alexander is the one who really picked out the color, and I really like this color. What did you think about the color we picked out?
Well, since I picked it out, I think it was the best choice.
Okay, yes. I actually had seen the color and I liked it, but he did pick it out. I'll give him that. Now, the drawback is that for all of the other premium paints, if you don't order those 3 that I talked about, the other premium paints take about 2 to 3 weeks for them to come into the warehouse. Now, with the delays in shipping and all, I don't know if they're stretched out any further than this, because this was last summer. But in about 3 weeks, it came in. They called me, went out there, picked it up, didn't have any problem. And we came back and we stored it out there in the edge of the driveway, and it worked out great.
Why are you taking pictures?
Now, one of the things that I want to talk about in putting this ceiling up, and I did a lot of research on this, one of the helpful things that I found is on one of the YouTube channels, and I wish I could tell you where it was, but I can't remember now, and that is that you have a choice. You can either buy a lift or rent one that puts up sheetrock to help hold this up while you're screwing it into the ceiling joists, or you can build one. I chose to build one. It was not difficult, and no, it was not going to be a major craftsman project for me. It was simply buying a few 2x4s and some brackets and screws, and I put it together. I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. But it was extremely helpful, and I'm going to tell you right now, unless you've got a crew of 3 or 4 guys to sit there and hold it up while you screw it in, you're going to need exactly one of these things, one of these lifts. Now mine is just a basic lift, as again, I'll show it to you in a minute, but you're going to have this lift and on 2 sides, and it's going to hold it up for you, and then you can line it up and then put your screws in. Choosing the ceiling, putting it in, the work, it took a long time to put it together. Now, of course, my buddy Tom, who's a sales rep for Placencia Cigars, he claims that he could have, wiggled his nose like Bewitched, put it up in 30 seconds or something, or over the weekend, if it had been drywall, because he really pushed for the drywall. But I didn't want drywall. I didn't want drywall mainly for 2 reasons. Number one, I didn't want something that if I did have a flood again, if the pipes burst or had a leak or whatever, that it would fill up with water and come down on me again. I didn't want that. Number two, I didn't want to deal with it because I don't like dealing with drywall. It's heavy. You have to be very careful with it because if you break it, it's easily breakable. And then you've got to tape and bed it and patch it and texturize it. It's too much trouble. I don't like drywall. I don't like drywall really in the house. I don't like drywall anywhere. I don't like drywall. I prefer wood paneling or metal paneling or some kind of sheet substance going on your walls and ceilings. And so that's what I did. So right now, let me show you some of the things that I did, some of the challenges that were before me in putting up this ceiling. In talking about the ceiling, what I thought I'd do is kind of take you through all of the steps and parts that I had to think about in putting the ceiling together. Right about in this area here, right about in here is where the pipe burst and it caused it to flood. And of course, when it flooded all of the sheetrock, and the sheetrock became bloated with water and it all fell down. As you saw in the picture in episode 1 of this series, this 5-part series. Episode 1 showed you pictures of last February whenever the entire ceiling came down. I replaced the ceiling, as you see here, with this metal. I thought about it a long time, and it took me a while to home in on exactly what I wanted. But I wanted something that if it did, I hope it doesn't, but if it did flood again, if a pipe burst or something happened and it flooded again, I wanted something where the ceiling really wouldn't be affected by it. Now, the pipe could burst again, and of course, the water and the mess, and I'd have to probably replace the insulation, of course. But I would not have to replace the ceiling, and the ceiling will not, trust me, this ceiling will not come crashing down on me or on all of my equipment. Water might leak through, but the ceiling's going no place. It's put in with these special screws, which I'll show you those here in a second.